So thank you very much, first of all, to come to my session, which is the last one, as they already say. So I know that you're all tired. So I would like to highlight at least 3 takeaways that I would like you to take home, at least. So what it will be JAX-RS, okay? And it will be the whiteboard, that it's a buzzword that we're going to introduce now. I don't know if you are already familiar with, and OAuth2, okay? So those are the 3 takeaways from this talk. Okay, so first of all, we are going to introduce JAX-RS. I expect many of you to already be familiar with this, so can you please raise your hands, people who have already worked with this? So, okay, that's nice. So a lot of you guys already know this JAX-RS thing. How many of you have used JAX-RS with Liferay? Okay, a lot of you. So are you using it 7.0, REST standard thing? I see. Okay. So this is pretty much the same. So we can maybe skip this part. So many of you are already familiar with JAX-RS. It's just like a servlet specification, but tailored for REST endpoints. So basically, it's designed to make it easy for creating REST endpoints that have HTTP verbs and produce explain, JSON, or whatever. So what we are seeing here is the typical JAX-RS application, okay, with the JAX-RS annotations, which is the interface or the API that JAX-RS provides to deploy services in a container. Normally, the JAX-RS applications are designed to be deployed inside an app server or something like, or similar runtimes. So one of the things that we are going to see actually is how to make JAX-RS deploy inside an OSGI container, which is, as you might have already known, it's not easy thing to do. So why JAX-RS and OSGI do not adapt so well? Well, the reason is that JAX-RS is part of the new enterprise. I don't know what EE4J actually stands for because they changed the name recently. So it's part of this specification. Okay, so it basically relies on Java service provided interface, which relies on thread context class loader. So it tweaks a lot of tweaks with class loaders, which you already might be aware that OSGI doesn't like. So that's not the proper way of doing things inside OSGI. So basically, JAX-RS is designed to work on a flat class path, okay, and it's not suitable for the modular class loaders that OSGI provides. So on top of that, the bootstrap of JAX-RS applications is static, which means that when you toss your application into your application server or container, it already needs to know everything about the application. Okay, so there are certain things that you can do when you're bootstrapping your application. JAX-RS allows you to, for instance, deploy features or do some other stuff like dynamic feature that allows you to react. Depending on the topology of your application, you can install filters or do some other kind of stuff with your application dynamically. But once your application is up, it's up, and you cannot longer change it. Okay? What you deployed is what it is, and there's nothing you can do. So basically, it's not designed to gratefully degrade or react if dependencies are missing, if they come and go, and stuff like that. So what did we do? So normally when you have to deal with EE4J standards or Java EE standards and OSGI, you will normally think of Apache Aries, which is a set of enterprise implementations for OSGI. Okay, so in this case, this is a Liferay contribution. Okay, so it's something that we have been working very hard to provide and to contribute to Apache Aries, which is the JAX-RS whiteboard, okay, for Apache Aries. So believe it or not, that's a whiteboard, okay. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the whiteboard concept. So far less people than have worked with JAX-RS. Okay, so the whiteboard concept is a very popular concept inside OSGI. So it not only applies to JAX-RS, but it's a way of interacting with the OSGI registry. Okay, so many of you might be aware of the service tracker pattern, okay, or declarative service pattern, and it's So the whiteboard is a pattern that allows you to declare what you need instead of grabbing it directly. Okay. So in this case, it simplifies a lot the deployment of applications or services inside the registry and the way they interact. Basically, it's another type of inversion of control. So instead of grabbing you all the services and doing the wiring yourself and reacting to events, you delegate that business logic to the system, to the runtime. So one of the upsides of this is that it is a standard from the OSGI Alliance. Okay, so it's specified in R7, and this is the URL where you can find the documentation. So one of the good news is that the implementation that comes in Liferay is the reference implementation for the standard. So it's fully following the documentation. So whatever it's written there, it's supported in the application. Okay. Another good part is that it both specifies the creation of services and also the creation of clients. There's a very typical scenario that you also want, for instance, when you have a portlet or something like that, to consume data outside of your Liferay instance from another REST endpoint or something like that. And it used to be a bit of a pain before because you needed to fiddle with the class loaders. Actually, there's a LPS that I remember. It is infamous because it's like, I don't know how many pages long, regarding the problems loading the class implementation for the client because of the OSGI and the service loader pattern inside Java EE. So there's no longer a pain in that because it is specified how you can get a client for JAX-RS. So the difference now is that the applications, resources, or extensions, any service implementing something in JAX-RS are just services that are deployed inside the OSGI container and bear properties. So the runtime, given the properties that you give to the service, will take care of wiring the things up and react to events. So it handles all the wiring and bootstrapping of your application. So in the event that anything happens, so some dependency becomes available or some dependency goes away, the system will rewire the application and bootstrap it again for you. So you don't need to worry about that. So artifacts can also specify priority, which is a nice thing. So you can replace any artifact that is in the system with your own. So it can specify logical dependencies. So this is a higher level of dependency specification, higher than declarative services, for instance. You know the reference that we have been talked about by Ray and others before, but this allows you to specify a dependency on a logical level, like I need somebody to provide a writer for JSON, or I need somebody to provide security for OAuth2, or some kind of authorization for my application. And the application will not be available until, or your resource or your extension will not be available until that other station is available or somebody provides it. And it's wired to your application. So that's a lot of things going under the hood that are difficult, and the whiteboard is already doing for you. Okay? So how does it look? It looks very similar, if you remember, to the other slide. The main difference is now we don't have the application class anymore, the application path anymore, because we no longer need it. But we have this component here is declarative services. So the TLDR of this is that you don't need declarative services to work with the whiteboard, but it's greatly encouraged because it simplifies a lot. And we specify now the path for our application like an OSGI property. Okay, we don't have to specify a name. It's not mandatory, although it's greatly encouraged too, because that's the key that you might use later to override your services. Okay. As you can see here, this is still using a singleton or a static registration of resources. So you can still do stuff like this, but you don't need to. You don't need to specify the services or the resources of your application like this. So you can easily split the declaration of your application. Okay, so this will be like an empty marker interface to deploying an application, and the deployment of resources. So what we are looking at here is just a resource that will introduce an endpoint inside our application. So now, instead of having the static registration, we can say that this is a resource. Okay? All these properties are listed in the specification. So you can say that this is a resource, and it is selecting an application. Okay? So now it's saying that it will attach to a component or an application that bears this property. As you can see here, this is a standard OSGI filter, which means that you can specify whatever filter you want. Okay, so it will attach to as many applications in your system that matches that filter. Also in the whiteboard, if you ever go to read the specification, you can see that there is a default application already deployed for you. Everything is configurable, so you can disable that. But if you don't disable the default application, then it's there for you. And if you don't attach to a particular application, it will attach to that default one. So if you just toss resources into your container, they will go to the default application. Okay, so here we can see the actual method implementation. Okay, so what we can do, it's what I told you before, is that we can now require an extension. So we can also say in our application that it requires to use an extension that is named Liferay OAuth2. So this application, in the event that we switch down our OAuth2 implementation, or it's not ready yet, for instance, for some reason, the OAuth2 implementation, it's not up already, our application will wait. So it will not be published, and it won't be available until the Liferay OAuth2 extension is ready. So it will be secured, and it won't be in any event available without OAuth2. Okay, so now we go to OAuth2. So how many of you have heard of OAuth2? Okay, so how many of you have actually implemented something, a client using OAuth2? Okay, and a server-side application using OAuth2? Okay, a fair amount. Okay, well, I didn't expect so many, but okay. So then most of you are familiar with OAuth2, although several conversations that I had also normally people confuse, or I sometimes also get confused about authorization and authentication. So OAuth2 is really not a protocol for authentication. Okay, it's a protocol for authorization, and specifically, it's a protocol that allows a user, or what's called resource owner in the protocol, to delegate to a client an authorization to act on his behalf. So normally, the client would be a mobile application or other websites or any backend application. So that client can act on behalf of the user that it's granting the authorization. So it's focused. That's what I ask you if you have implemented something before, because it's focused on client developer simplicity. That's what they say on the web page. So if it's focused on client developer simplicity, you can imagine where the complexity has been moved to. Okay, so to the backend side. So it's not easy actually to implement a secure implementation of OAuth2, but we got you covered, and we have made it for you. So it also provides like different flows. So it's not easy to implement all flows. So there are like 4, 5, 6 flows, and they are also extensible. So there are like specifications for adding even more workflows, for instance, for home devices and stuff like that. Living room devices, mobile phones, stuff like that. And it's PKCE extended, authorization code, resource owner password, client credentials, a full range of those. And it also allows to extend the tokens that is used. So this is a token-based authorization protocol. It's normally used with bearer tokens, which is the predominant type. It's the default type that we have implemented in Liferay. But we also have an extension point, okay, where you can provide your own implementation of a token provider. Okay, if that's what you want to do, that's allowed. So, and this, the implementation that we provide allows to authorize requests and to limit the surface, the surface access using scopes. So scopes is one part of OAuth2, and we use it a lot in our implementation. So you can actually shape and tailor the parts of your API that you want to expose. Actually, one of the things that we have taken good care of is that we allow you to, or we wanted to provide all the tooling that you need to deliver a consistent API, a coherent API to your customers. So even though you need to compose your API using different JAX-RS applications, so you toss several stuff or use API-O and then your own JAX-RS endpoints, you can provide a consistent view with regards to OAuth2, so the customers don't see like an heterogeneous API, so you can build it properly for them. So how do we do that? So we basically provide support for every JAX-RS application that you deploy inside Liferay in 7.1, from 7.1 on, is secured behind OAuth2 by default, unless you change that, which is something we think is good, but many people asked us how to disable that. Like, I want to develop now, and I don't want to take care of OAuth2. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to disable that now. Okay, so if you want to know, you can find me or look into the documentation. But it's easy to disable it. You can use configuration, okay, just to disable OAuth2 support. And it automatically sets up for you the auth verifier filter and JAX-RS filter that will check for the proper scopes and the permission checker. So it enables for you the permission checker in Liferay, so you can use the regular service builder services or any other Liferay services that you have that use the permission checker will work seamlessly with the OAuth2 implementation. Okay. So we also provide several strategies to define the scopes per method, per HTTP method, declaration via annotations, patterns using configuration, or you can provide your own, again, using extension points. So this is all, so you can provide this coherent API that you want. And you can choose to group all applications together. You can split them in different realms. You can do whatever you want. That's what it says. You can provide separate authorization and scopes, hierarchical scopes. So actually, the scopes are hierarchical. So you can say like a scope, we can see that later, like everything implies everything read or everything read documents. So you can build a nicer way for applications to request scopes that are hierarchical. So in case that you provide everything a scope, then everything read and everything write is implied. So you don't have to go so granular. So let's see some demos, which I don't have too much time, so I recorded them. Sorry for that. This is how you would create the standard template with Blade. Okay, you just have to create. The template is REST. A package come Liferay DEVCON. The class names will be REST app, and the project will be DEVCON REST. So this will create a module that we can already deploy. Okay, using the regular tools that we are used to and love. Okay, so that's deployed. So once this is deployed, we can just import the application into our IDE. So we are going to see that the application that is deployed is just a regular skeleton that we have seen before. Okay, that's it. This is the JAX-RS application base, which is greetings, and the name, which is greeting REST. Okay, that can be changed, so you can do whatever you want with it. This is the standard template. But you can see that it's already listed into the available application. So I don't know how many people are aware of this command, JAX-RS check. It's available since 7.1, and it will list all the REST endpoints that are wired in the whiteboard. As you can see there, automatically it's wired using Liferay OAuth2, and it's using the HTTP method request checker by default. Okay, so that's the application we have already deployed, and these are the endpoints that it has. Okay, moving on. Then this is the Postman application that I told you about. You can use it to test your endpoints and also to use OAuth2 tokens for it. And we can see now we can't still access our application because we haven't initialized OAuth2 yet. So this is the point where many people start asking, how I can disable this because I want to deploy my application. So, okay, you can still use basic here, okay, as you used to. You just need to enable it, okay? Instead of OAuth2, you want to test services and so on and so forth. But I wanted to show you how to enable OAuth2, which is really simple. So this is what you need to do. Once you have your application deployed, the only thing you need to do is go Control Panel, Configuration, OAuth2 Administrator, and you fill this form, okay, your application. You just put whatever website you want there because this is the description or the URL of your application, but this is a description. The callback URIs are important, okay? So that's the URIs that are going to be allowed to redirect from OAuth2. Okay, so once we have this, okay, we are going to repeat we are going to allow OAuth2, okay, and get a new token. Okay, this is the authorization code request. So we fill in the details of where to get the authorize and the token, the authorization and the token, and we fill it with the client ID and client secret that we have already been given when we register the application. Of course, we can change this. That form allows you to introduce whatever client ID and whatever client secret you want. We greatly encourage you to use something that is generated and that you keep it secret, okay? Because if this is known, then it's important also to set client credentials in body. Okay? So we can request the token, and what we are going to see next is the authorization screen, which is empty. As you can see now, it is still empty, so we don't have any permission assigned to our application. So we're going to fix that next, and here we can see what we have been discussing, that our application that we have deployed and that this has the standard verbs of HTTP as scopes. So now we have granted get, and we request the token again. And what we see is that now our application is requesting greetings REST, and it's allowing to make HTTP GET request. So the good part of this is that you can, of course, tailor what you want to be output there. So this is just the default that you get when you get download 7.1, but you can actually put whatever you want there. As you can see, now it works. It gives a status 200, and it is working, okay? Cool. So as I told you before, you can deploy several endpoints, okay? So we can deploy now a different application and use a different strategy to declare the permissions of the scope that the application will have. We are going to use annotations now, which we specify using this property here. And now we can use annotations in the different methods of our endpoint or application to declare the scopes that they need. And we can get that using this dependency here in our Gradle project. Okay, so we get those annotations if we get this dependency. So once we deploy our application to the system, what we get now is the new application here, okay, with annotations feature up there. So both are wired into OAuth2, but one using annotations, and the other one is using HTTP method request checker. Okay, and we can see that now in the OAuth2 administration, oops, they are listed as two different applications, and they carry totally different scopes. So this is everything read, everything write, and we have still the older services. Sorry, the older scopes. So what we can do now, so this is, I'm going to go now to a live server. So here we have our application, and this is a new one, and the other one. So now we can for instance, go and configure one of the features that we have is we can configure a scope mapper. So scope mapper is a component that you can actually deploy, or you can configure the default one, and we will add one scope mapper for all the application. That's default, will attach to all application deployed. And what it does is that changes the scope's name get head options into everything read, and put post patch delete into everything and everything write. Okay, so it's a very simple mapper. And the result of this should be, if everything is working as expected, that now calculator rest and greetings rest, if you see now greetings, instead of listing every scope as individual verbs, now it provides a consistent space of a scope. So it's everything read. Calculator rest also has everything read and everything write. Okay, and they are part of global scopes now. So we can assign, as you could see, we can deny or assign using global scopes, and it will affect all the applications. So now you only need to request everything read, and all the attached applications will be granted the same scopes because they are named the same. So there are a whole bunch of things that you can configure. Okay, and the control panel system settings here, OAuth2. So you can find here the bundle prefix handler factory, which allows you to prefix namespaces to your scopes. So for instance, if you want calendar endpoints or document library endpoints to be prefixed like DL or calendar or whatever, you can do that here. Or you can change, as you can see, the Beret token provider, as I told you before. You can register configurable scope checker. So this is URL based, and you can do that using pattern matching, like the verb that you want, the URL, and the scope you want to grant, stuff like that. And also, I'm sorry for the rush, you can extend in a different, so this is a totally different module. So you can extend the application that I had, the calculator rest, for instance, with a new resource, okay, with a new scope. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's a everything right multiply scope that is listed here for that application. Okay, everything right multiply, as you can see, it inherits from everything as well, because it's named with the dots. So everything right, everything read, and everything right multiply are inheriting from everything, because it's using the dot notation, which is the default for inheriting. There are a whole lot of stuff you can do. You can register extensions like JAX-RS features, which allow you to dynamically install filters. Well, that's mostly everything. So sorry for the rush, but there's a lot to show, and we had very little time. So if you have questions.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you.
But where can we find documentation about this? Like I see on the website that there is just like a little page about JAX-RS, but not a lot about all these details about the.
So the specification should be in that URL. So isn't it there?
Maybe I was speaking about the documentation on the Liferay website.
Oh, in the developer network,
yeah,
you can find documentation about this. Okay, and as I told you, specifically to the whiteboard, you can find it here. JAX-RS, the version that the whiteboard is implementing is JAX-RS 2.1. So I forgot to mention that we also have server-side events available. Okay, so if you want to, you can use it too. And in the developer network, my Wi-Fi is working horribly now, but I can show you later. It's in the developer network also. There's the documentation how to configure and create and deploy the REST endpoints.
Okay, and can we use it for remote services for Service Builder?
Yes. So you mean OAuth2? Yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Yes, JSON Web Services are also supported. So, as actually I should have mentioned it, this portal services means JSON Web Services. So, as you can see, this read your personal user data and download documents and images. So, these services are available through JSON Web Services and also documents endpoint.
And then it uses the permissions for the like usual
Yeah.
Liferay permissions. Okay.
Yeah, so the OAuth2 feature initializes auth verifier in the default way. So once the request is authorized, it's using the regular mechanisms that you all know already.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, over there. Yes, this is available. Yeah? Yeah, everything that I shown you is available on Community Edition 7.1. I actually use the 7.1 GA2, I guess. Yeah. Any more? Okay, so actually we're hitting 0 now, so perfect.
Okay.
So thank you all, and please rate this session in the Events app and find me outside and ask anything that you want.
Thank you.